and welcome to the Perdie channel. I am your host, Matthew Perdie, and we are here with Thomas Ranieri. How you doing, man?
I'm very well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, thanks for coming on and making the time. I know life is crazy these days, and politics and life, and it's inflation is like insane right now. So I feel like things are harder for everything you buy is more expensive than it needs to be, right? And life is just slightly harder than it needs to be right now. So, so what you got going on in life these days?
I have. Where do you want me to start? So I'm an attorney. I work here in Warren County, Front Royal, and I only moved here about 2.5 years ago to start my own firm. And the idea was to do commercial litigation, but also to get involved in political law, which I always really enjoyed, and I've always been politically active. And as a lawyer, I have more options to, to achieve whatever strategic or tactical goals I may have politically, or my client or something would have politically. And I was living in Washington, D.C., and that's no place for a decent person. And so I needed a place where I love Virginia. My family, on my mother's side is from Virginia. They've been here since the 1600s.
Wow, the 1600s. You can track your family all the way back to the 1600s.
Yes. In fact, we had a writ on my mother's side. There was a writ from King Charles II, I believe, granting them land in the northern neck of Virginia.
What?
And in fact, my wife is a genealogist, and my grandmother had said this, but it was my grandmother. I was like, this seems a little apocryphal, but she showed us her family tree, and then my wife did work to verify it, and actually, I'm the first cousin to George Washington 12 times removed.
Wow.
And I'm also related to I'm more directly related to the Robert E. Lee, who my great-great-great-grandfather married his sister. So I've Virginia in my blood, and even though I kind of moved around when I was a kid, this is the place I've always wanted to be.
It's pretty handy to have a wife that can help you.
Yeah, no, it is, right?
Track that, right?
So there's that, and then obviously being a political kind of person, and having political aspirations myself, I got involved in the Warren County Republican Committee, and now I'm on the executive committee as the chair of the Shenandoah magisterial chair, and I'm also representing some J6ers in a suit against the government. Which is an uphill battle. I
can imagine.
Yeah, no, it is. And what else am I doing? I have a podcast called "Oh No, It's the Ranieri Brothers." It's my brother and I, and we kind of talk through what's happening not only in Virginia but also in the United States and the world from a perspective of really trying to understand it on a deep level, and just sort of talking through problems or issues, rather than just saying, okay, here's what you should think or what you should believe. We tend to have more of a dialogue. I think that we're kind of going for a Socratic dialogue where we're asking questions to each other, trying to answer the questions, and trying to develop wisdom and truth.
I think that's how a lot of people get to the truth, though, right? Just by having conversations and asking questions, and then, they'll find blind spots between each other sometimes, right?
True, but that is true. But the issue is, and this is something I've realized, and I guess I'm reacting against in part in the format of the podcast is. If you Hardball with Chris Matthews from back in the day, everyone's screaming at each other, right?
Yeah, that was awful.
In order to have an actually useful conversation, instead of, in essence, a verbal football game, you have to use courtesy and humility, and not insist upon yourself, which my understanding is very difficult for certain types of people at certain levels of society to manage having that kind of conversation. Perhaps they feel it makes them vulnerable. If that's the case, it indicates a deeper problem. I'm not going to get into that, but I do know that the only way these conversations work is if you really work at being courteous and polite and engaging, actively engaging with the other person, saying if you don't necessarily agree. And I mean, ultimately, it's that great. The first lesson they teach you in improv is it's yes and, not no but.
Correct.
So if they say something, you're like, yes, I can see that, and I think it's missing this other thing, is a very different vibe than no, that's not quite right, but
Right.
and so I try to do that too in my practice, with my clients, or when they're on the stand, it's you want them to get into a flow of conversation. So I didn't mean to. I guess that was a bit of a tangent.
No, it's fantastic. We're trying to get to know who you are. I was going to go there next, and I should note that your involvement with the Warren County Republicans is how we met, and we met just by proxy, and just the fact that we're like probably the two most vocal and obnoxious people in the room usually, right?
No, we're not obnoxious. We're doing the work to. So
I'm kind of teasing ourselves a little bit when I say it, but no, genuinely we are expressing legitimate grievances in the county.
Well, more than just expressing legitimate grievances is simply making political statements in the beginning and actually attempting to influence the way these committees aren't supposed to be Soviet committees, right? Where the American tradition is we're supposed to fight stuff out, argue, and be open, but apparently that's a lie. I mean, that's not actually true. Like, the actual political culture tends towards conformism and consensus, and that means that very little useful thing gets done, and then because one person can just spike an entire thing.
Yeah.
Just like a heckler's veto kind of thing, and we don't have consensus, so we can't do anything now. It's like, no, I mean, like, you just someone's unhappy, well, too bad for them. We have to do things, but that requires leadership. And I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's a legitimate problem, right? Because if someone's trying to prevent something really bad from happening to the community, and it gets spiked because of a personal interest or some other fear, then you can't defend the community from said problem.
Right. Defending the community then becomes offensive to the person who's objected.
Yeah.
So now it's sort of like, I want to do this thing, I want to help with this thing. This person doesn't like it, or he has this problem with it, and therefore now we can't do anything at all. And so we sit here impotently, but at least I guess that person's feelings aren't hurt. I mean, what a useless waste. I mean, like, you're talking about the entire community. One person's feelings getting hurt really shouldn't enter into it.
Can you get into what you wanted to bring up in the meeting?
Well, yeah, I mean, so basically what I wanted to bring up at the most recent meeting was a resolution against data centers. And initially I hadn't really been talking about it because I didn't want anyone to know it was going to come down the pike. I didn't want to warn anyone. But clearly there's a leak in the executive committee because certain people did know. And they knew about myself being the person who was pushing it. And so now it's pointless to try and keep it quiet. Now I have to try and brute force it through the committee. But I was trying to have them pass a resolution condemning the approval of bringing in data centers into Warren County, which is a pet project of some people here because they'll make a lot of money.
Yeah, is that the ultimate incentive for data centers? Because I want to talk about this a little bit. Data centers are kind of a new problem in terms of the public consciousness. This hasn't been on people's radars so very long, and but data centers are something that a lot of people in Virginia have been very frustrated with because the amount of power they use, right? They put a huge strain on the grid, and there are environmental concerns as well. But and of course, taxpayers are fronting a lot of this, right? So why don't you talk about your issues with data centers, and we'll kind of go from there.
Sure. The problem with data centers is, okay, so the reason data centers are becoming more and more ubiquitous is because of AI. AI is causing a massive strain on the computing power that's available to the big internet companies that are providing these things. And of course, every single one of them has to have their own AI, which means now instead of like, there's like 2 or 3, but it's like 20, 15, however many there are. And so they're all sucking a massive amount of computing power. Computing power means heated machines, which means you need to cool the machines. And obviously, machines that are working very hard are going to use more electricity. Or at least maybe they don't use more electricity, but they just use a massive amount of electricity as a baseline. Right. One way or the other, they're using a lot of electricity. And so as a result, what you have is these massive data centers, which is just basically, have you ever watched Silicon Valley?
The movie? No.
The show?
No.
So in one of the episodes, they go to a server farm. and it's like the size of 10 football fields, and it's all just racked servers.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's no windows, no doors. It's kind of a joke, right? But it's like it is a technological expression of purgatory. It is soul sucking. But that's not the point. The point is that you need like 3 or 4 guys to run the data center, because most of the work is being done by the machines. So all these arguments that normally come along with bringing a new business in, I'm going to get back to the water stuff in a second.
You're fine, yeah.
But is like you want to increase tax revenue and you want to increase employment. Well, data centers do not increase employment, and they're not revenue generating areas. They're the place that the revenue generating area is going to be in California or whatever, but they're just using Virginia to run the power through it. So there's no, you're not like how do you tax that? The answer is you can't. You can do property taxes, and that's it. So you're not getting very much from employment taxes. You're not getting anything from an increase in tax revenue. It's not an attraction. No one's going to go see it.
It sounds pretty negligible when it comes to property taxes.
Right. Well, maybe when compared to how much money they're making on it,
yeah,
it's very negligible. So it's like, oh yeah, sure, we'll pay like your $20,000 or $30,000 a year in property taxes, because after we pay for the machines, this is almost pure profit, right?
Terrible.
So you're talking about like a business model where you're like a 30% is being spent on the expenses and 70% is profit. And none of that profit inures to the benefit of the place where the data center actually is. But you know who it does help? The people who help get it built, and the people who own the land, and the people who own the building, and I bet you also the people who help to get the permits. I would never accuse anyone of being corrupt, nor would I ever accuse anyone of entering into a non-disclosure agreement with data center companies or people who are trying to promote data centers in order to prevent those people from talking about what they're doing or the involvement of the data center companies. That is definitely not happening, and it's definitely not happening with some of the people who are in the Warren County Republican Committee or are running for the Board of Supervisors. It's impossible, because that would be unthinkable, right? So that would mean they were selling out their community, and who would do that for a lot of money, right? So then you enter into the problem of water. Again, water is something that is even more important than electricity in Warren County. We get all of our water from the Shenandoah River. We are already at capacity in terms of how much water and population we can manage. This is one of the reasons I'm also against having new housing developments entered into it, into our county, because again, or from Royal, because we really can't afford that many more people, the amount of water that we're using. And if you recall, the last few years, not this year, thank God, but the last few years, we've had drought warning, and then we've had like emergencies declared where we're not allowed to use water at all unless for like really essential functions, because of how low the river has gotten.
That's wild. I mean, even this community that I'm in right now has like constant water scarcity warnings, and it's like, oh, don't fill up your pool and whatnot. It's like it's always going on. Imagine if we just had like another couple of huge businesses, the strain that would be put on people is unimaginable.
No, it would go beyond that. It would mean that we would have to start importing water from somewhere else, which means then we become even more dependent on, so the reservoir I think we'd have to use, the closest one is near Northern Virginia. So now what we've basically allowed is the colonization by corporate America and DC in Warren County, and that then forces us to become dependent on the water that they provide to us, because now we can't afford to make our own water because we have this data center that's taking tens of thousands of gallons. Most recently in Texas, they had this huge drought, and the Texas data centers, I have the article, it's like 43 million. Other people were not getting water. They were not able to access water, like actual civilians were not able to access water. But don't worry, the data centers kept working.
Oh my gosh.
I think it was 43.3 million gallons of water during a month or two of drought. And we're talking about insane. And by the way, if your concern is that your computers are going to overheat, why in heaven's name would you build a data center in Texas? This sounds like a great place. You know what would be a great place for this? Alaska.
Yeah.
They have snow, they got plenty of water, and it's freaking freezing.
That's right.
but but so if we come, you're talking about increasing electricity prices, which again, for the people who promote it, it's not going to bother them. They're going to have a lot of money from helping to get the data center, so they're going to exempt themselves from the downstream consequences of actually having a data center, because they'll have plenty of money to pay for it. But you know who won't? Everyone else. So you're talking about a situation where all of the people, all the middle class and lower class people in Front Royal are going to have to pay more money for electricity and water, so that the people who help build to support a data center that's not providing them any benefit whatsoever, but did enrich certain people in the community.
How much more expensive would electricity become for people in like a county like ours if they built a significant number of these data centers?
I don't even know if they need to build a significant number of them. I think they just need to build a single one that's big enough, and that will cause enough of a problem.
Wow.
We're not a big town.
Yeah.
And if you're talking about but the honest answer to that question is this: I don't know. I'm not an expert on those sorts of things, and I'm not aware of how. I mean, electricity being a utility, there are special rules. They have a special contract with the government. They're in essence kind of a minor version of what the East India Trading Company was. It's in essence a government owned or not operated, but government controlled company.
It has to operate on government standards.
Yeah. But it has freedom to act like a company and has all these like protections and all the rest of it. And there's like ways of conning it. I'm not even going to get into how utilities are corrupt, because we have a limited number of minutes here. But I don't know the answer to how much electricity, but I do know that it's going to cause. I mean, if we're talking about even the smallest, I really like to focus on the water aspect, because the water in Front Royal, as you've already mentioned yourself, we're already scarce, and we don't have a data center, or there's like one data center that's really small. The instant that you bring in one that actually takes tens of thousands of gallons per day to run, then you're talking about however much the use. I don't know what the usage is, but if you jump that up by a significant percentage point, now all of a sudden what happens? Well, water's more scarce. What happens to more scarce resources? It becomes more expensive. This is basic economics 101.
So let me ask you, why won't these guys go somewhere like Alaska or like somewhere else in the country that's way better equipped for this kind of thing, or where there's not really a populace that's going to be massively impacted by it?
I imagine there are technological issues or I mean, like Alaska, I mean, I just thought of that off the top of my head.
Sure.
My instinct would be to say that would be really hard to maintain a data center in Alaska.
Probably more expensive,
too.
Right,
it's a rough place, and it's out of the way of everything.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, whereas, like it's the same thing with, like, for instance, like when they're running lines for the stock market, they like to run them in a straight line right across, so that it goes from New York to Chicago over to, and because again you're talking about like even nanoseconds have an important impact. Like you are at a disadvantage if you're trading in Chicago, even though it's only like a second. But that 1 second can make or break because of how intense and how minuscule the different how detailed or small it is. I don't know.
Sure, that has a huge impact, just having 1 second heads up on things.
Right, exactly.
Right,
and I'm surprised that people don't. But maybe there's not a way of doing it. But it seems to me that like a smart way of handling it would be to like, if you wanted to game the system, you could set up a listening post between New York and Chicago, and just like, I'm going to do this trade.
It's interesting to think about. I mean, it seems like perhaps it's just the path of least resistance, and perhaps the path that is most cost efficient for these people that are wanting to build these data centers. If
we're going to be not cynical, but if I'm going to be a little bit Machiavellian about it, the answer is going to be no one wants these. I don't think anyone wants data centers. And Washington, D.C. is like Mordor, and because of that, like they have a lot more real power over what happens in the DMV, and so they can and because the functionaries and the all the different swamp creatures, when they get enough money, they leave the city. They don't want to live in the city, because who would want to live in that city?
Yeah.
And where do they go? They come places like here, which is a little far out, right? So luckily, we're more in the penumbra.
Sure.
Of the DMV, but closer, like in Manassas and other places near the Beltway, they just get steamrolled right? They don't have the money. They don't have the companies already have the leverage in the cities. They already have control over the local levels of power because that's where they live, and because they have the money, they can buy off politicians. I'm sorry, that doesn't happen. Politicians are never bought off.
Never.
So I think it's just this is where there's power, and so they're going to use their power where they have it, and they don't care what happens next. They just want to be rich, and if it gets uncomfortable, they can always leave.
And I think you come from a pretty informed place here, especially considering that you work in law, and also that you were in D.C. How long were you in D.C. for?
I was on and off in D.C. for about 7 years.
7 years? You spent 7 years in and out of D.C. That is wild to me. I spent about let's see, how many years was I actually in D.C.? Maybe about 3 years, and then I kind of moved to Alexandria, and then. After getting ambushed by some BLM protesters, I'm like, you know what? I think I need to start figuring out a way to live in a place where I can actually carry a gun and shoot someone if they come after me. So
absolutely. When I was towards the end of when I was living in DC, I would go out on my porch at night, and we lived in Maryland, just over the border, and 2 to 3 times a week, I could hear a riot going on.
Wow.
They weren't reporting on it, but you could hear the sirens. There's the sounds because it's all in one place. It's not like it's like the train's over here and the cars are over here and all this other stuff. It's like no. Like where's that specific sound coming from? That direction. Why there's sirens and it's like brighter over there and so like there's just always something wrong going. So when everyone started whining about Trump bringing in the National Guard, I'm like, that should have happened 10 years ago.
Yeah. So let me ask you this about D.C. then. Why did you move there in the first place? What brought you there?
I fell in love with it. When I visited, I've always loved politics and I was idealistic. They beat me out. DC beat it out of me. The more I learned about how the city actually worked, the more disgusted I became with it. And I said when I left that the city chewed me up and spit me out. I was never going to survive there. I was never going to thrive there because there's certain things I'm not willing to do. And I can't tell you the number. I'm not going to embarrass anyone. I'm not going to talk out of turn. But the stuff I've seen it do to people's souls and to their personalities and their integrity and there's all this backstabbing. Like you have to be engaged in these underhanded games, even in your workplace where you're supposed to like feel safe and you're supposed to be on the same team. Like there were times when there like a whisper campaign against me, and I would get in trouble. Or I got let go because someone didn't like me, and so they said a bunch of stuff about me, and it was just more politically convenient to let go of me than to let me continue to work.
Wow.
And so I'm, like it happens a few, and then one of my other jobs, there was some guy, he was a complete sociopath, lied to me the whole time I was there, and then the whole time was undermining me, and so then dropped the book on me and got me fired by misrepresenting, like straight up lying about what I've said, and what
was the motivating factor there?
I was conservative. I was open about it. I didn't lie about it. I wasn't a jerk about it. I wasn't like running around, but I was like, one of the things that they said was like, if any of the female lawyers heard your points of view, they would get very upset. And I was like,
and they're telling that to like calm you down off of your conservative stances.
Yeah, well, no, they were like, one of the reasons they're letting me go is I was going to.
Oh, that's the reason you're fired.
No, it wasn't. Trust me, because they told me it wasn't. Like, this is not the reason we're firing you. But
okay,
if they ever heard you say this, they would get really upset. And I'm like, how is that not their problem? I'm fairly certain that I'm allowed to have whatever views I want to.
Which view are they? Did they have a grievance with?
Well, I am a Catholic, and so I have certain views on the morality or immorality of homosexuality.
Right.
Which was one.
Meaning you're a normal Catholic.
Right. I'm a normal Catholic. I mean, I wasn't running around, and I wasn't saying like, let's burn them at the stake. But I was just in a couple of conversations. I'm like, well, this, that, and that. And don't get me wrong, like I probably could have been more prudent in the way I talked about it, or a little more guarded. But that's kind of the point of what I'm trying to make too, is like the fact that I have to like self-censor so much just to survive is too much. And I never wanted to. And the thing about it is the people above me were above me by virtue of the fact that they were in this organization and could survive in the organization, not because they had anything like inherent talent. In fact, like one of the places was just like most of the places I've worked is just filled with the most like obscene mediocrity. Yeah. And that's the big thing that Washington, D.C. really, really, really loves is mediocrity.
And it promotes it and it protects it. And that's a very interesting thing you bring up, because I was thinking about this today, is that we kind of suffer, the conservative movement, and I think conservative people in general, we suffer from the fact that we don't speak up enough, all of us, in our workplaces and like what we believe, what we like just being a normal Catholic means you're against homosexuality, you're against abortion. And these are two like controversial topics, and a lot of people do not speak their mind because they're afraid of being blacklisted, taken out of their book clubs or whatever it is, or like getting slammed on Facebook. And so many of us are kind of hiding, retreating within ourselves when we really should be advancing on the culture nowadays.
Well, there's this presupposition that this is the only way to survive. And the fact of the matter is that despite what they say, there is a certain amount of I value X more than Y. I'm willing to stay quiet about this so I can remain part of the club. And again, another reason I moved out here was because I wanted to start to build alternative institutions and organizations and power bases that were not dependent on Washington, D.C. Because if things go bad, you know, and as they increasingly seem like they're going to,
yeah,
you know, we're gonna need these other institutions that are, you know, whether it be just law firms that are not suckling at the teat of the federal government, or are frightened of the ACLU, or agree with the ACLU, or any of those other things, you know. And even I'm not, the ones on the right are just as compromised. They're just as, like, the thing about the 501c3s is they're basically ways for billionaires or millionaires to have whatever particular view they have be promoted. That's what they're for.
Yeah. Except
for leftist NGOs, which are financed apparently by the federal government and by to actually push the. In many ways, they're criminal organizations because they break the law with the soft assent of the people in power. They're following the actual rules of power, not the ones they state. You know, like,
right.
We're a democracy. No, we're not. We're not a democracy. We have not been a democracy since 1865. We haven't even been a republic since 1865. There's no, I mean, the basis of the federal government's power, you ask anyone in D.C. and they'll tell you it's the monopoly of force. Well, monopoly of force is the basis of government of empires. It's not the basis of government of republic, consent of the governed. But if you don't like the southern states, you conquer them after they say they're free. They don't want to be part of your thing anymore. You've stopped being a republic because you haven't gotten their consent. You forced them in. Now you're an empire, and we've been an empire ever since.
This is interesting because it sounds like, you know, what you're saying earlier is that DC kind of, you know, banged you up a lot because of just from you voicing conservative and honestly basic Catholic stances. And so for people that are conservative and Catholic and or Christian who are going into DC and want to make a difference and want to fight for God and like these really genuinely virtuous values, what advice would you have for these people to survive in a place like DC?
I would tell them that they should keep in mind that they're rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic and to not take it too seriously, because there's nothing they can do. There's nothing they can do. The levers of power are completely controlled by pre-selected people from pre-selected schools who have pre-selected people that know them, and they know that they're going to do X, Y, or Z because that's who they are. Democracy from the very beginning. If you go back to what people were saying right after even back right after the revolution, they're like, politics and power is too dangerous for people to be left to the population. So we have to have ways of channeling it then and pushing it in certain directions, because if we just did what the people wanted, things wouldn't work out well. But the problem is we can't do it honestly. We have to lie. and we have to manipulate, and we have to control, and we have to contain, and we can never be honest about what we're doing, because the whole time we have to tell them that they're sovereign while making sure they can never exercise that sovereignty, which makes the whole democratic republic thing just kind of a huge puppet show. It's a lie. It's a complete lie. In fact, I remember one time I was at a a mixer, and I was smiling. I was talking to people. I was having a good time. I like to be social, and I walked up, and this girl, she had the most sour puss on her face, man. I've never. And I walked up, and I was like, "Hey, what's going on?" And she was like, she shook my hand, she introduced herself, and she was like, she could not help herself, and she said, "It's all smoke and mirrors, right? All politics is just smoke and mirrors. It's all one huge lie." And I was like, "Yeah, I know. But does that mean I can't be happy?" Because apparently to her it meant that she couldn't be happy. But she wanted to commit. She both wanted to challenge my smile. She wanted to see if I could maintain my mindset, because that might give her hope that I think maybe that she could have that same mindset one day. Maybe if we're looking at it charitably. But also I think she wanted to confess. I think there's I think this is a big thing, and one of the reasons why. When they're like, "Oh well, he said the quiet part out loud." There's a part inside of these people, even the most corrupt, that is really wanting to tell the truth about this stuff, and the more reality is at odds with their narrative, except for Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom exists as a skin suit to embody the narrative. I cannot. That man terrifies me.
Yeah, and it's kind of scary just how much of a chameleon he is while still holding on to extreme leftist values.
No, he doesn't hold on to leftist values. He holds on to whatever values are going to help him accumulate more personal power and privilege.
And I just think those are leftist values now.
Well, right, with California, in California they would be, right?
Yeah.
But he's willing to throw them overboard. Like he just signed an order to increase enforcement
stuff, yeah.
Because he doesn't want Trump coming in. Trump comes in, he looks impotent.
And that's the chameleon part of it, right? It's just he's just going to whatever it takes to stay in power or become popular, and the things he's willing to do. I think your fear is warranted with this guy.
You know who he reminds me of? Peter Baelish.
Tell me and the audience who that is.
Peter Baelish is from Game of Thrones.
Oh.
He's the.
So I stayed away from watching that show because all the naked people.
Well, there are lots of naked people, but the politics is really interesting.
I've heard that, yeah,
and I personally enjoy that. And Peter Baelish he's like a minor nobleman, but he's really clever. So he manages to insinuate himself into the upper reaches of the governance of the kingdom. And but he's doing it entirely for himself. And so one of the other characters says about him, it's probably the best encapsulations of his character, is he would burn the kingdom down as long as he could rule the ashes.
Wow.
And so he never does, everything he does causes more problems in the long. It helps him,
right,
all the way up until the point it didn't. But when he overplayed his hand, but generally speaking, he by himself is probably responsible for more damage and destruction in his quiet way to the challenges faced in the characters in that book, in the television series and those books, than any of the other characters, even the most evil character. Because go on, sorry.
No, it's fascinating because as you're describing this, it's making me think of Newsom and some of these other politicians who are, I wouldn't say they're a complete empty shell, but they're mostly an empty shell, and they're amorphous, and they move to wherever they think they need to be politically to gain power. And in a way, there is actually an empowering aspect of this in terms of our movement, the conservative movement, Catholics, whatever, right? Because if the things that we say in the public domain, and when they resonate with people, and we can push the Overton window in our direction, we can force some of these people who are empty shells to move in our direction at times.
So I've started to think more and more about how the Bible talks. There's a reason that we're called sheep, and it's because we generally are. We're going to follow a shepherd. We'll even follow a wolf. But people like Gavin Newsom kind of remind me of sheep who pretend to be shepherds. And so they can get a bunch of other sheep to follow them, but they're still sheep. right? And they may be more dangerous because passive aggressive and people or people that are actually morally or characterly weak are actually the most vicious and prone to like acts of horrible violence and evil.
The nature of cowardice.
Right, exactly. But still at the same time, you're not wrong that because they are so responsive to the winds of change, perhaps as we'll call them, they're a good bellwether. Certainly, I mean they're kind of like, well, I mean if you want to, sorry to switch metaphors, but they're like like the rooster on the roof where when the wind changes, the thingy changes.
No, that's a good one.
And so they are. I mean they're still weak, cowardly prey animals, but they can still be useful, as determining where things are going and how they feel things are going, and they can see, like, it's fun to watch them try out narratives in real time, because he tried the podcast thing that wasn't quite working for him. Ugh. He tried, like, during the fire, he tried the one thing, and then he tried Trump is a king or a tyrant or whatever. And now, none of this is working. I guess people really do want to feel safe in the places they live.
He's kind of a tryhard, right? He's a big-time tryhard. Probably like the most tryhard politician I've seen in recent time.
He is a try. He is a tryharder. He would be funny if he weren't a dead-eyed skin suit. I mean, like I could genuinely enjoy laughing at the guy. If he weren't so, I mean, like he's a dead-eyed skin suit. I mean, like he and Mitt Romney, if they ever had babies, it'd be terrifying.
I would not like to think about that very long. So let's move on. Let's move on. So you moved to DC. I think you mentioned did you meet your wife there?
No, I met my wife in college.
Oh, you met her in college. Okay.
Yeah. And I also went to high school with her brothers.
Got it. Okay. So how did your wife handle you being in around DC, working in DC?
She works at the Library of Congress.
Wow.
And actually, that's all I'll say on that. Okay. I don't want to get her in trouble, but yeah, but she works at the Library of Congress.
So she we'll just say that she's privy to a lot of the madness that you've expressed here.
Well, listening to the bureaucratic stuff that she has to go through is some wild nonsense. Like I hear a lot about how things work and in the bureaucracy, and it makes me want to kill myself. The idea I could never survive in that environment. Again, we're talking about like aggressively enforced mediocrity, and fear. There's so much fear.
I want to close in on that aggressively enforced mediocrity. I haven't heard that phrase before, but I know exactly what you're talking about because I've experienced that. Not where I work, but like in other parts of DC and just in like other pockets of the movement. Right? Can you define that? Like you talked about it a little bit, but can you like find a way to like kind of define that in like a few sentences?
Sure.
Sorry, I put him on the spot here, guys.
I guess the best way of approaching it is through the James Burnham's concept of managerialism. See, managers are not excellent. Excellent managers are frightening because an excellent manager stops being a manager and he turns into a leader. And a leader will get people underneath him who will want to follow him and go in the direction he wants them to go. A manager is an enforcer from above. So if we're talking about the best people being leaders, the second best people, we call them bravos, are want to be managers. They can get their little power trips from making their people miserable. They can encourage them to work harder for the company for no reason at all. So they're just like a hired gun. And then they are frightened of being overtaken. So who are the people that they promote in their stead? They promote C-level people. Anyone who's good is a threat to a manager, because if you can outperform or outact or even just a better leader, you're going to be perceived as a danger to their authority, and they're going to be perceived as someone who they have to get rid of or marginalize, because if you show them up, I guess I'll tell you a story. We'll get back to this. Let my brain think about it. My cousin worked for the post office a long time ago as a mail deliverer, and he was able to get his route done faster than the other mailmen, and he was like like mafia style, like taken in the back room and been like, "You slow down.
What?
You're making us all look bad because you're working harder than us, and we all want to be lazy." And so we all want to do less work. We don't want to be effective. We don't want to have people's expectation raised, because then we might actually have to do the work that we're hired to do. Ugh, exhausting. And so the problem with excellence is that it threatens people who are comfortable in their mediocrity. And so therefore, but when your entire system is based on the presupposition of mediocrity, then you have to ruthlessly get rid of people who are not mediocre. And this is one of the reasons why they're going to have a hard time. I mean, jumping forward a little bit, but they're going to have a hard time holding on to power in the long term, and managerialism is going to die, is because the best people, the smartest, the most independent, the most creative, are going to increasingly, it's already happening. I mean, I moved to front row. I mean, okay, I guess it's a pat on the back. I didn't mean to give myself, but
it's fine.
But the best people are opting out of the system, or not even allowed to get into it. And if you look at how revolutions start, you'll see again and again. And this even goes for the noblemen in like France and stuff. Like, there was so much mediocrity in the aristocracy, and they refused to hold themselves to account. So they insisted upon their traditional rights and privileges as noblemen, but were not fulfilling their end of the bargain by providing excellence in government, excellence in war, excellence in thought, that justified the position in the first place. And so eventually, and because of that, they kind of knew it too. I have to imagine in the back of their minds or in their deep hearts. So they had to start, like keeping people out of the aristocracy, ossifying it, because if they allowed genuinely amazing and excellent people into it, it would shatter this illusion that they had made for themselves, that they deserved all these privileges, and that despite, like, even though the quality of what they were providing had gone down so terribly, they were still doing a really good job, or it was like, the best they could do in the circumstances.
It's wild.
So then you get a revolution. Why? Because all the best people, all the people that could lead a revolution, all the people that could lead a government, all the people that could actually provide good governance, were kept out of those positions.
They're all outside the system.
And so they're like, you know what? Why don't we all work together and start a new system? I mean, was it worse? Absolutely. And the French Revolution is a horrible thing that happened, but it still is the truth that you get a bunch of resentful, angry, and vindictive people who know that people that are dumber than them, less articulate than them, less capable than them, are getting positions they don't deserve because they went to a legacy university, or because their family was from New England, or because they're progressive, or they don't have an arm, or they're a homosexual, or they're a transsexual, or whatever. And so, like, it's like, yeah. So when you insist upon excellence, it mean. Okay, hold on. I'm about there. I almost got it. Excellence requires the understanding of the highest things and trying to live those things in your life. And to people who don't feel that they can do that, it's very scary. And when those people are in charge, making sure that no one comes to introduce the concept of a higher thing. Because then all the little people that are underneath them are going to get real, like, oh, wait, that would be great. Oh, actually, yeah, we should do that. No, they want them in a state of numb compliance. And having someone who could actually set their hearts and minds on fire, that's terrifying. That's a threat to the system. Because the system is keeping people docile.
And these might just be someone honestly just trying to do the best job that they possibly can do and are achieving excellence in the process, and they become a threat to these people.
Absolutely.
It kind of makes me, do you know David Webb? Sound familiar at all?
It does sound familiar.
Yeah, he's a conservative broadcaster on Sirius Satellite Radio. He famously says, "It's all about power and control." All right. He has that kind of like, all right, like that kind of like super deep voice.
Yeah.
Guy's brilliant when it comes to history and whatnot. But you always find him saying that because it is always about power and control for these people, particularly the left.
It is, because they. So I was just reading this. I've been reading this book called "Selective Breeding and the Birth of Philosophy," and it was a dissertation by some highfalutin guy, but it's really good. And it's difficult to explain in quickly, so I'm not going to even try. But I will point out that he talks a lot of spends a lot of time talking about what's called the nomos, or we'll call it the folk morality, or we'll call it cultural morality, social morality. These are like rules of like politeness, and well, of course I believe in Zeus. I mean, who doesn't believe in Zeus? And that kind of thing, like this unthinking kind of predisposition towards a certain behavior or attitude.
I see.
And there's nothing new under the sun. Like this is the great big lie of American society, is every 20 years they're like, oh, we figured out a new way of doing things. No, you didn't. It's the same thing. It's the same thing using new methods. We had candles. Now we have light bulbs. What do? They produce light. That's it. That's what they do. We need light. They produce light. If we come up with a new way of making light, it's still a candle that is a higher tech candle. It's just a thing that produces light, right? And so, if you spread your influence using the internet instead of a newspaper, or a scroll instead of a newspaper, you're still doing the same thing, spreading your influence by way of print media, right? Period. Right.
Yeah.
So it's just, there's nothing new under the sun. There's just new ways to commit the oldest sins. That's it. The newest ways of committing the oldest sins.
And faster too.
Yeah, we can get more sins per hour done.
That's right.
And that's
And the accessibility, the proximity factor. I mean, you think about these people that are on. I've got to rant about this because just pisses me off, all right? So, like, I work, in and out of D.C., and you follow some people that you meet or just come across, or just influencers. Okay, it's a funny meme, whatever. And, like, a lot of these women, you follow them, and it's just fine, professional, like, conservative content, whatever. And then, like, one day I open up Instagram because, like, I'll get messages on there, just normal private messages from people. And I just open up Instagram. I could be, like, in a press conference and, like, a bunch of reporters behind me or whatever. And, like, first thing that pops up is, like, some girl, like, half naked, like tits coming out, like, not fully, but, like, a lot exposed. Yeah. And it just makes me look like a man whore. But I'm like, I don't want to see this crap. I don't want to unintentionally sin when I'm like open up my phone or look like a man whore, right? It's just so frustrating. It's like these women just stop, especially on the right. Like, better.
Well, no,
you know better.
Well, because so they know how to say the words better, but the thing is that the female, in large part, female power comes from being viewed with desire, and in a certain psychological way. If they do get you to sin, it's a victory for them. They can collect. It's like, hey, I have captured a bit of this person's actions or behavior.
Women without God, that is.
Well, yes, women without
obviously,
God.
Yeah.
I mean, like, because the thing is, like, they're parsing out in small doses what a wife should do, where she wants to entice one man, her husband, and that's good, right?
Yeah.
But they want to like break it up into like. They want to break it up into like mortgage payments, right? Or rent, like,
Well, it's sort of like a dopamine. They must be getting some sort of dopamine hit, right? Because
absolutely.
It's sort of like guys will get a dopamine hit from like seeing like a provocative picture or whatever, or even playing a video game, which might be okay in a lot of cases. It is okay in a lot of cases. I play games a lot, but I think that women are getting addicted to the attention, obviously, right? They get addicted to the attention, and what happens? So they post like a somewhat slightly provocative photo. It could say like Psalms 3:16 or whatever, right? And it's just a picture of them like looking like beautiful and like slightly provocative. It's like, this has nothing to do with this verse that you posted, firstly. And secondly, don't desecrate God. That's my biggest problem with it, on top of everything else. But they get like a little dopamine hit from it. They get all these simp guys, like 400, 500, 600 guys, like liking and commenting on this stuff. So it's bad for the men, because men shouldn't be rewarding this behavior. And it's bad for the women because they're getting addicted to something that's prideful and vain.
Well, true. But I mean, women are very responsive to, tend to be very responsive to, and more in touch with the zeitgeist, and also like what they need to do to get attention and survive, because they're more anxious about that sort of thing than men tend to be. And so they tend to react to those kind of incentives, right, much more quickly, and or much more. It seems to impact their behavior more, or at least more demonstrably, although I'm certainly willing to be wrong about this. But when you consider the fact that when you look at it without the question of like, is this justifiable or not, what you see is someone who has a real understanding of what gives them short-term power, because the mixture of God and sex is a potent thing, and especially for religious men, because you're activating two deep-seated needs: a need to touch God and a need to touch women, and then you're kind of muddling those two things together. Is from your example, and taking everything else apart, like that's really good propaganda for like personal propaganda. Like all of a sudden her status is raised, and that's what they want. And everyone wants to increase their status. It's one of the games humans play, right? Is wanting to increase their status, and I don't personally have a problem with that. The question is how you go about doing it.
Yes, how you doing it is the issue,
right? And so, and even that is mild. I mean, like you could say it's a downstream effect of OnlyFans, or you could say OnlyFans is that taken to its logical extreme, or both, perhaps.
I think it's something that comes from the proximity factor, right? The proximity is so much faster, immediate. Like all you have to do for like if you're one of these girls is take one of these like provocative photos or slightly provocative photos that's just for the purpose of making you feel good and attention. You post it and it's just like 500, 600 people instantly see it. I mean, it's just so easy, right?
It is easy, and when you're talking about like any kind of political influencer, you have to understand, and this is one of the reasons why there's all these wild stories about like sex and sort of thing. Power itself is an aphrodisiac, both for men and for women, and so at the very least, both men and women, you have to assume that running these realms, right, are at least in part aroused by and attracted to power and being in the proximity of power and gaining personal power, right? This is something that that is deep within them as a person. It's something that drives them, and again, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. I think if it's properly channeled, but the problem is with power is it's really easy to let it get out of its proper channel and kind of like let it like run amok.
Yeah.
And people being people, everything works on the bell curve. So you're like, if a certain subset of people self-select into a sociopathic, power worshipping sort of dynamic, is it surprising that they become like a little bit like beyond the normal sexual morality or modesty? It's not surprising to me.
No.
I'm not excusing it. I'm trying to understand it.
Yeah.
And I'm guilty of it as well. I mean, I'm also attracted to that stuff.
Well, you're human beings, so it's the awareness and the ability to repent and work against and confess. And as a Catholic, I notice that when I confess something, that that said thing has less of an effect on me next time. And now this is me as a new Catholic. I only became Catholic a year and a half ago, and I don't know if that's a complete mental thing that my brain's doing or if that's genuinely part of the grace that's bestowed upon us by God. But I have noticed that is very interesting.
Even if you have certain crosses that you have to bear over long term in terms of sin, right? Doing it with the Catholic Church has been described as a field hospital, and confession as like treatment, where you go in and you get your wounds healed from engaging with the world and taking you're not only taking the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, you're also having to carry the cross of whatever you've done wrong, and because that causes a psychic burden. Because you're an imperfect person, so you made mistakes, and there are certain things like alcoholism is a good example of it's like Catholicism says if you become addicted to something, it ceases to be as serious because you have less control over it. And so again, you're going to drink, and alcohol is going to drink, and until they can get where they need to go. And this is speaking for someone who's also struggled with alcohol. Okay, and my mother also drank herself to death. She died at a young age because she overdrank. So I've observed this, right? But the difference is that when you have the church, it keeps you from spiraling too far out. Like it's still like, yeah, you're in a rough shape, you're having a hard time with this sin, but if you're going to confession, you're trying to engage with the sacraments, you're still going to not allow yourself to kind of spiral out into the very worst sort of addiction behaviors. And so I guess what I'm saying is, yes, luckily for you, because you're a convert, you're going from not having the light of grace in your mind and soul to all of a sudden having all this. So like all this stuff that used to be, like, I can see how that would be like an amazing change. But as a cradle Catholic, like The devil, I think, works differently on us, and so then you get into a bad habit, or a bad state of mind, or you have a certain attachment, as they say, to a sin. Some Catholics, some people just give up, but my general feeling is now, yeah, it sucks and it's embarrassing and it annoys me that I have to keep confessing this, but what is the alternative? What, pretending that it's not a sin?
Yeah.
Or saying that I'm good enough as I am, which I'm obviously not, and no one is. There's always room for improvement. Which is not to say that you're not, good enough for God or that God can't forgive you, right? But the thing about, I'm going to go back to the sheep analogy, is one of the reasons that I think Christ talks about us like sheep is if you talk to shepherds, you'll find out that sheep get themselves in the most ridiculous situations all the time. And so, you'll have a sheep who'll jump into a crevice, be stuck in a crevice. It takes them 3 hours to get them out. And then the stupid sheep will just walk right up and jump right back into the crevice. I cannot think of a better analogy for human behavior. That is exactly right. And the thing about him is he's the good shepherd. He's the perfect shepherd. He's not going to get annoyed with the sheep. He's just like, okay, fine. We got to get this sheep out of the stupid crevice again.
He understands it.
Right, exactly. And he knows it. He made us, right? And so it's sort of you have sins, you have things that are wrong with you, you've done bad things, your soul is broken, your heart is broken, your mind is hurt, or you've been abused, or you've been through trauma, or any of those things. And it's yeah, he gets that. And even if you've done bad things, it's still okay, because he knows that there's only a certain amount of control you can have over yourself, especially after that kind of thing happens. The only thing that you can do is just keep trying to reach out, right? And not really give up on the process without hating yourself. You shouldn't hate yourself. You're just behaving like a human behaves, right? You're acting in the bell curve of human behavior. And as long as you don't go beyond the pale, there's always and I'm talking about really beyond the pale, there's a great line from, I don't know if you ever watched Fury, the tank movie.
Mm-mm.
Okay, I love this movie.
Okay.
But at one point they keep it's in World War II, and they're there's this religious guy in the tank. They call him Bible, and they go, "Hey, do you think that Hitler could go to heaven?" And he's like, "I'm tired of answering this question," because they're doing it to needle him, right? And he goes, "Yes. If Hitler, he was a Protestant. He's like, if Hitler repented and accepted Jesus Christ as his personal Lord and Savior, he could go to heaven. But that ain't going to save him from man's justice, right?" And that's true, right? There's man's justice and God's justice,
right?
And so So when I say beyond the pale, I'm talking about something that would require man's justice upon you.
Sure.
But even then, you can be forgiven, but you've really messed up your life here, right? And I feel like I'm rambling. Am I rambling?
No, I'm very fascinated in the conversation. I'm enjoying what you're saying. So keep on this point. It's a good point you're making. I think this is just to pull back slightly on this. I think a lot of what the problems that we have today with politics, culture, and it is with the wrong people being in power. And a lot of the wrong people are in power because a lot of the good people who are trying to self-govern and are self-governing themselves and working hard to govern their behavior and are genuinely you pull the water bottle up are people who they're afraid of being corrupted more or at all by the power structures, and so they avoid power at all costs. And so I guess my question to you would be, what would you say to someone who feels like maybe they're being called to, or that they should engage in politics, or maybe jumping to the personality sphere a little bit, the media sphere more? What would you say to someone like that who is trying to self-govern, is you could say, we'll just say Catholics because we're both Catholics here. Is a hardcore Catholic who wants to have a little bit more influence in what's going on politically and media, whatever. What would you say to someone like that who's afraid to jump into that sphere because of the power potentially corrupting them?
I would say they shouldn't do it, and the reason why is because and the reason why is different than perhaps you might think. G.K. Chesterton said, I'm paraphrasing, that the knight may despise the monk, and the monk may hate the knight, but neither can say the other isn't going to heaven. The monk despises the knight for his violence, and the knight despises the monk for his passivity. Because to the knight, we have to do something. We have to fight. We have to overcome. And to the monk is like, no, it's just Jesus. We have to pray. And the answer is, it's both. And in Catholicism, it's always been both. And part of the problem with Protestantism is it tends to choose sides. And it's like it's always this. So it's an excess of virtue, as G.K. Chesterton says. So they choose one virtue and go too deep into it. All of which is to say, politics is dirty. The use of power is difficult. You have to make difficult choices. People might get hurt or killed. Someone's going to win and someone's going to lose. And there have been kings and nobles who have done hard things that are still morally justifiable. And the problem is that we have equated passivity with virtue when it's not. And if you're frightened of hurting someone in your exercise of power, then you are not fit to exercise power. You have to make hard decisions. But the problem is that, going back to the puppet show, is you have these salesmen, essentially. That's what a congressman is, a salesman. Comes and he points this beautiful picture. All the meanwhile, we're drone striking kids. We're doing assassinations. We're invading people here. We're giving these people arms. We're doing all this stuff. A lot of it, I believe, unnecessary, but not in and of itself immoral, right? It depends on the end and the method being done. So the exercise of power is fine. The rules are people tend to take the no one reads the Bible in its entirety and anymore, or perhaps ever. They just find something they really like about it and keep talking about it. So the turn the other cheek thing, that's for you and me. If you do something that pisses me off, I will turn the other cheek. If you try to murder my family, it doesn't work anymore.
Yeah.
If you get
you're not going to abandon your family to turn the other cheek.
Right, exactly. I'm actually not doing my job under God's rules. The thing is, Catholicism especially lays out a very complex but comprehensive map of what behavior is acceptable and what isn't, right? And so, but that's much broader than what most people think. The fact is that kings had people executed, and they were right to do so. Kings had people burned at the stake, and they were right to do so. We sometimes fight wars we should fight. Most of the time we don't, but we often do. Sometimes do fight wars we should fight, or help people who are fighting a war that they should fight. And that means that people died because of taxpayer money, which means that you and I are absolutely culpable, because what are we? We're a government of the people, right? So anything that we do as a government, it's our responsibility. The guilt lies on us if we buy into the belief that we're a government of the people. And so, but no one wants to face that. So they have people that go out and make people feel good about American values and virtues and the Constitution, while the actual use of power, assassinations, death, murder, all this stuff is being used. Politics is not nice. It's not easy. The only way we had a consensus for a while is because everyone was in the army during World War I and World War II. And then they came out, and what did they build? They built civilian barracks. If you look at the subdivisions that were made during the 50s and 60s, they're basically just an army barracks, just more comfortable, right? So so they were all kind of in. They all felt like actually kind of part of the government. They were the government. The government was them. And they got information from the same three channels that all kind of agreed with each other. And if you know about Project Mockingbird, which I'm sure you do, it's Project Mockingbird, isn't it? Maybe I'm using the
I'm
wrong
not
term.
sure. I mean, it sounds familiar. I might know of what happened in it without knowing the name.
Well, the CIA, which was established in 1948 by the National Security Act. 1947. The National Security Act of 1947 turned the OSS into the CIA. And the CIA, with the OSS, I don't know if you know this, but it used to be called, so obviously it's the Office of Strategic Services, but the Army joke was it's the Office of Special Socialists or something.
The sneaky socialists slip into everything.
Right. And so, but they're all from Harvard and Yale, so they all had they had the most updated progressive thinking at the time. And so then, I'm almost certain it's called Project Mockingbird. So what they then tried to do was they just began to interact with news channels and tell them, like, you can say, you can't say. This. And so so there was a narrative control. There was, so everyone was kind of on the same page, right? And they'd all been trained by the government. They'd all been trained to trust the government. They'd just been through hell, and that could only last for a certain amount of time. Because with the introduction of new technologies to speak, it kind of destroyed the consensus, and it should have. But now we're actually getting back to not the end of history, where people are acting like they normally do, where if there is civil strife, when you have more than one tribes that are inimical to each other in the same geographic area, history is fairly clear that will only last until one of them has enough power to wipe out or get rid of the other one. And since ultimately leftism is a facade, I mean the communism is a sales pitch. Once you get into government, as long as you can do whatever you want to, right. And then just throw up the sales pitch, right? So that's what the communists did, and in Soviet Russia, and that's why Stalin came into power, because he was a sociopath, probably psychopathic, murderous guy who was ruthlessly pragmatic and cynical, and did not in any way, shape, or form believe in the essential truths, quote unquote, of Marxism, but knew how to use them to get and hold his position.
Well, that's typically how it is with the Marxists, right?
That's always just how it is.
Every case that I've seen with these crazy communists and socialists, whatnot, people like Mao and whatnot, who are just responsible for on the lighter end, tens of millions of lives being killed, right? Either because they were Christians or through starvation. That's your phone. That's just the pattern I see all the time. Is that they'll say all these communist beliefs and they will enact some of these policies, but ultimately, it's about whatever they need to do for power.
Well, it's bread and circuses. It's bread and circuses. Yeah. Like they'll enact a policy that like helps people, or they think helps people, or whatever, because they're like, oh, the people are unhappy, we need to give them something. Oh, it's a triumph of socialism, but it's not. It's not, and it's not just the Marxists. It's any all leftist programs, including like neocons and Republicans, because that you have light liberal and heavy liberal.
Yeah.
And that's basically what the two parties had been since, probably since the turn of the 20th century, right?
Right.
Like they got rid of the John Birch Society, and they got rid of any kind of dissident right voice because it was conflicting with the liberals going to, liberalism is going to, whatever liberalism is or whatever its endpoint is supposed to be, is going to succeed. And so everyone needs to get on the board with that. That's why I can't stand Buckley. Because Buckley was the first containment right wing guy, and
you're basically saying he's gatekeeping the right, 100%. Keeping it from getting it more conservative.
He wanted to make sure that conservatism at the time could still be could still interact with and be not offensive to the Ivy League in the Ivy League opinion. That's what he was trying to do.
Fascinating. Would you say Rush Limbaugh is some of the opposite of that?
Rush Limbaugh, I think, is
because I think that he's one of the few guys that I think spoke to how a lot of Americans felt at the time, and sort of in a way he wasn't a gatekeeper, but he was someone who kind of let everyone know, like, hey, like this is where we're at, like this is wrong, and this is okay to say this.
Right. Rush was the reason he was important is because we wouldn't have Tucker Carlson without him. And not just Tucker Carlson, but I'm saying I see a direct line from Rush Limbaugh to Tucker Carlson because he was the first truly successful voice in challenging the monolithic narrative control. And it's not like they didn't try hard as hell to get rid of him. And they hated him. It was one voice, and they could not stand that one voice. And the more they argued and complained about it, the more people were like, well, wait a second, why is this bothering you so much?
Well, it's fascinating because I do remember everything was blamed on him in the media. The Democrats, everything was blamed on him. And I don't know how much he enjoyed it, but I think to some extent he did because, he could refute their claims and throw some facts in there because people would tune in and say, okay, what's this all about? I hear all these horrible things about this guy. And he had a following of like 30, 40 million people, including myself.
Oh, yeah.
And he was so good at doing this work.
And so I only stopped listening to him when I was like, no, you're not keeping up Like he like so like there's like you can see an intellectual evolution, especially on and also the break, like the dissident right break was already, he kind of like started the fire there.
Absolutely.
It wasn't what he was trying to do, but by being a dissenting voice, it started making people question, and then people started looking into other things. Like I started reading Burnham, which I had never even done before and or thought about before, and because he had kind of like awoken it, but then at a certain point he hit a wall where he couldn't really go any further. I think he was held back by his liberal. I mean, he was a man of his time. His certain probably guardrails in his brain. I never got the sense that he was a super self-reflective person. I mean, he was like really observant and interesting and like really engaging with the world, but I never got the sense that he was like thinking about like, well, okay, well, where does this go? Where's the next step? I mean, at a certain point, he had his shtick, we'll call it, and he couldn't adapt anymore, and that's fine. I mean, sometimes that happens, and he did great work, but I stopped listening to him when I was like, you're not going far enough now. You're not thinking about the next step past that, right?
Yeah.
And,
well, I think he hit a very generalized audience base. I think he probably wanted to hang there, whether it was he consciously wanted to hang in that place or not. But I think at the center of what a lot of Rush Limbaugh is and was is he was very, how do I phrase this? You know what? He just believed in Americans. He believed in the spirit and the originality and the power and the strength of American people. And I think that's really at the heart of a lot of the stuff that he said at the time.
There's no doubt he was a patriot. I guess the issue I have is that it's misplaced. The federal government doesn't deserve your affection or loyalty, and it's there to take advantage of you. I mean, even when you consider World War One, which every war since Lincoln. So Lincoln provoked the South into attacking Fort Sumter. I don't want to get into it all, but basically, he said that they were going to leave, and that he was sending a ship to get them out, get the federal troops out, and he would evacuate it, right? And instead, that ship brought more troops and more food, and he basically said, "No, we're actually not going to give it back." And it's like, okay, well then now we had to, and it still probably wasn't a good idea because who cares? It's like, just like leave it be, right? But but it was a point of pride and everyone's angry, so they attacked it, which was probably a mistake, but it was one that was provoked by us. You think about the Gulf of Tonkin incident. Why do we get involved in Vietnam? We set ourselves up and then lied about what happened in the Gulf of Tonkin, and so that we could get involved in the war. And the Lusitania in World War One. We were told by the German embassy that it is an act of war to send military equipment to England, who's actively at war with Germany, using a civilian liner. By doing so, you turn the civilian liner into a military vessel. This is all according to the laws of the sea. This is all correct and legal according to international law, which they say they love so much. But they did it anyway. They stuffed it full of military equipment. And do you know that the Germans actually took out an ad in the New York Times telling people not to go onto the Lusitania because they were going to torpedo it?
No, I hadn't heard that.
Yeah, they were saying, they said this is carrying military weapons. This means it's a valid target of war, and we will sink it.
Wow.
And still, it's their fault. It's their fault. No. It's our fault. We did that. It's the passive-aggressive thing. We're going to push. It's the same thing with Ukraine. We're going to put bioweapon labs. We're going to put chemical weapon labs. We're going to try and pull it into NATO. We're going to use it as a base of operations to challenge Hitler's rule. We're going to use color revolutions to get rid of Russian-leaning politicians and then put instead Western-leaning nations in there. And we're going to use it basically as a leverage to take out the Russian state. You invaded it? How dare you do that? No. You don't get to make a military buildup on someone, in someone's freaking border, and then be like, I can't believe they attacked me. And it's just like, I'm not saying it's okay that Putin is doing this, but I'm also not saying that it wasn't. It's ultimately, this is how we start wars. This is how America has started wars since 1859 or 1860. It's the same pattern over and over again. It's absurd that why? It's because it allows us to be cry bullies. Why do you think the reason there are cry bullies in the United States of America is because monkey see, monkey do, right? When you see the same trick being done over and over, even if it's just subconsciously, you start pulling the same thing where you deliberately provoke someone into doing something or cause a problem for them and then dishonestly represent it. so that you can quote unquote win, right?
Yeah.
And so, like, for instance, like, you can't have a tyrant unless there's a million little other tyrants that are willing to connect their minor tyranny to the upper tyranny's person. You need tyrants to have a tyrant. You need republicans to have a republic. And so when you see like all these like weird things that are happening, a lot of times it's because it's downstream effects of, you know, metapolitics. And so like the whole crybaby thing is a great example, and that's why it's been so successful, because it's like, yes, this is a manner in which we approve of you taking out your enemies.
Well, this is interesting because what you're basically describing the works of is the deep state, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Like, for instance, why did, like, you know, before World War One, the Kaiser and the Tsar and the King of England were all related to each other. We're all writing each other letters saying, we need to stop this from happening. We need to stop this from happening. I was literally taught in college at a liberal college. I went to a liberal college for 1 year before I went to a better one, where they said essentially like, oh, it was the bureaucrats were in charge. So the bureaucrats wanted to go to war, so they went to war. Why? Because they controlled the narrative. So they could make sure people wanted to go to war. They could make it seem like they were the good guys and everyone else was the bad guys. And then they could tell everyone it was going to be easy. We're gonna kick their ruts. It was just, everyone sign up. Let's go after them. You know? And, you know, in almost all of human history, it's been really hard to get people to serve because you're putting your body on line, right? And so that's why they got higher status. You got higher status, better pay, you know, equipment, armor, and then eventually you can become a noble, blah, blah, blah. Because what you're doing is kind of above and beyond, right? But now they make it seem like putting your entire body and life online for the sake of the federal government is worth it. Because you're not fighting for your country, you're fighting for your government. The government's the person that are going to war.
That's right. You get owned by the government when you enter the military.
Right, exactly.
So,
and isn't it interesting? I've always found it very interesting and annoying because everyone like goes on and on about how amazing democracy is and how it works really well and how it's the only like really justifiable or legitimate way of ruling each other. But it's like, but when we need to defend democracy, we need to get rid of all freaking traces of it. We need a strict, hard hierarchy with a guy at the top who says what's going to happen, and everyone else has to buckle down and do what they're supposed to do. So they have to use extreme military hierarchy, which is like the most harshest and most organized and hardcore hierarchy, in order to protect the system they say works the best because it has no hierarchies.
No, it's just a facade. I mean, you know, and you look at any of the writings from most of our founders, and they absolutely despise democracy because they saw it didn't work.
Oh no, it's ridiculous. There's some. So I was actually, it made me shake my head. This is the kind of stuff that kind of pushed me in the direction I went in terms of my political leanings. Is I was reading a book of quotes, and in the introduction of the book of quotes, it's like the 1,000 greatest quotes in the history of the world. And they quote John Adams as saying that basically democracy is one of the most insane things. It's never worked anywhere it's been tried, and it is absolutely, you know, it is unacceptable. And he's like, what a bad state of mind John Adams must have been in to think this thing. Like he was just depressed one day and he said it. Why? Because democracy is good. Everyone knows it's good. Oh, he must have had a really hard day. No, you are not listening. He is telling you that what you have been told about democracy is a lie. That what you have been told about what the founding fathers said about the way this world and the way this government is supposed to work isn't actually the way they actually said it. We are importing our modern values and then basically resurrecting the corpses of the founding fathers, sticking our hands up their asses into their mouth and going, democracy is good, democracy is good.
That's exactly what it is.
When George Washington would have started a revolution 30 years ago. I mean, do you realize this is something that this is something that really drives me nuts. Do you know how much tax, because they had to pay tax, slaves had to pay in the Roman Empire? Oh wait, no. Let's not go that way. We'll put it this way.
Sure. At
the end of the Roman Empire, the richest families were taxed at what they considered to be an outrageous amount, 10% of their income.
Oh my gosh! If only.
They thought that 10% was an outrageous amount. When you look at it, again with the slaves, I think it was like 15. Wow. I mean, like. Obviously, it's not going to be a one-to-one thing, right? Because it's a different historical period. But even in the most tyrannical kings, you know, had limited powers of taxation, right? I don't think a single king during the Middle Ages could even do an income tax, right? they had to have taxes on certain things that were more like real. But I don't think they had the administrative power to even try and track that kind of stuff. But the idea that, I mean, like at the time, it was like a 3% tax on tea.
Yeah.
That caused us to go absolutely freaking not, and we're gonna start a war over it. I'm sorry, like
where are we at?
30%.
Yeah.
I pay. It's so I'll put it to you this way: a guy recently won $2 billion in the lottery. Do you know how much he took home?
Probably half that, right?
658
Oh
million.
my gosh, that's ridiculous.
So congratulations, you've won a bunch of money you can give to us now, and so
it's a government operation at this point. The lottery is a complete government operation.
It's always been a government operation. It was always, in fact, I think it was the founding fathers who started it as a way of raising money for the government because they couldn't have other types of taxes. And I don't object to it, but the idea that you're taxed, I'm sorry.
It's ridiculous.
It's absurd.
It's absurd.
You're not, the only people who are allowed to be rich are the ones who already are. That's the rule. And potentially they might take you under your wing, and hopefully you get a good one. But like generally speaking, yeah, you're not allowed to be rich. I mean, why?
Well, you get punished for making once you get to that bracket where you're starting to get beyond the point where you can actually save money and invest money. That's when you're punished the most.
Oh yeah, that's when
right?
you're absolutely punished
right.
The
That's
most.
Exactly around that area, and then you go to like make these investments, and you're like. You only got a few shots to really break beyond that bracket, right?
Yeah, no, it's incredibly frustrating. Like I just had to write a massive check to pay taxes. I'm not certain what I'm getting for them. I paid my state taxes. It took a huge chunk out of what I have in my business. It's going to make it difficult for me to pay for school for my kids because, of course, I have to send my kids to private school because I actually want them to actually get an education. But I also have to pay for the people that I have to pay for public schools for other people to go to, despite the fact that I'm not using them. For reasons I'm yet to be able to figure out why I should have to do that.
Right.
And plus, I guess, what welfare programs, I'm suffering. I'm working hard, like super hard, and to hours with like 80-hour work weeks and stuff like that, in order to pay the government thousands upon thousands of dollars for what? I mean, like. The Billy Joel song comes back to me, moving out, and he says, you can pay Uncle Sam with the overtime. Is that all you get for your money? And it's like, yeah, that is all you get for your money.
It's one of those things that I don't think there's enough outrage about, and part of the reason for that is because we have paid these absurd taxes for so long in American history already, right? For over a century.
Yeah, they were introduced World War One.
Yeah,
and they were introduced in World War One as a temporary measure.
It's always temporary, right?
And
always temporary.
I really hope World War One ends soon so we can get rid of our income taxes.
Well, we're just at a point now where, I mean, we gotta look at like where the money's going to that we're paying, and the two things that most of our money is going to right now, Social Security and Medicare.
Yeah,
and they. Both are, I think, are about $1.6 trillion annually. So you think about that. These are basically redistribution programs at this point that are completely insolvent. And these are programs that, like, okay, you pay into Social Security your whole life, and then you get to a point where you may be 65 and you want to collect Social Security, but you also want to, like, earn some extra money on the side. Well, that's too bad because you can't, if you earn a certain amount of money, you can't collect that money. Or you can't collect beyond a certain amount. So a Social Security is a program that keeps people trapped in poverty and trapped in mediocrity.
Oh, absolutely. I actually did an entire presentation about this in law school for one of my classes, where I talk about basically how it's this the whole system is designed. It's the most. It's the dumb. It's a system that's designed by committee. It's to address people earlier we were talking about how one guy can mess everything up, right? Because they just say no, right. Or I don't want to hurt your feelings, right? And so there's going to be some guy who thinks he's conservative. Like Thomas Massey strikes me like this all the time, where he's standing on a principle that is okay, good for you for standing on a principle and blocking a really pragmatic change, right? Yeah, it's going to cost. When do we stop caring about money? When you guys started printing it, it didn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's not real. It's just a piece of paper. And we all agree that there's stuff in there. What is financial solvency? What does that mean? Who cares? You'll just print more. I mean, It's just like nonsense. The idea that we're ever going to have the political will or self-discipline to address the debt. It's hilarious.
This is the frustrating thing, because politicians will constantly vote themselves and their friends more money through these obnoxiously, insanely large omnibus bills or whatever, what have you. Yet... And so they can, and also they use their knowledge of what's going on to predict the markets, like our prolific trader Nancy Pelosi, right?
Yeah.
But like,
she's incredible.
Yeah, I just we gotta learn a couple things from her, right? Apparently, but the thing about this is that's so frustrating is they're able to access that wealth while. Not only are they keeping other people from doing that themselves, they're actually making the rest of America more poor through inflation, right? Think about just the past 4 years, the dollar's been inflated 20%. And incomes are definitely not going to keep up with that.
No. They haven't fixed since the 70s inflation. If you look at when you look at income versus value and the inflation tax, the salary started to stagnate in the 70s during the time of hyperinflation. The inflation went down or stabilized, stayed up though at a certain baseline level. They fixed it, but salaries didn't. And then inflation keeps going up, but salaries don't go up with it. So it's not just
they go up, but just not nearly fast
we're
enough.
talking.
They never, it's like minuscule.
It's like that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so it's like it's not really a sustainable thing, and we are literally being made poor through inflation.
That's right.
Right. But hot take. The thing of so you said they can use their power and their knowledge to make a lot of money, and that's true. Politicians. But I've always thought this: they don't pay politicians enough.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. If you're saying if I can take a stab at it, that if they were paid well enough, that there would be little incentive for them to rip off the American people.
Well, yeah,
to enrich themselves.
Someone who is like a lawyer who's making $500,000 or $600,000 a year, who might actually be a really great leader or administrator, is like, well, why would I leave my job to go take a pay cut and deal with a bunch of midwits? Right, and there's a great statement of when you make politics a play, you're going to get theater kids who rule you, and that I can't think of a better description of AOC than a theater kid in power. I mean, the whole thing is it's we have theater kids because it is a play, and most theater kids don't make very much. So hey, $150,000, $160,000 a year for a congressman, that looks great, and I'm going to be like a camera, and I get to be pretty and cute, and I get to say things, and everyone's going to be like, oh, this is so amazing, and they get a good, which is what they want more than anything else in the world. They just want the applause.
Well stated. Well, Thomas, is there anything else you'd like to say before we wrap this episode up here? This has been really good, deep, thought-provoking, fun conversation here. Is there anything you want to leave our audience with?
Yes, there is one thing I've been thinking a lot about. The first act of resistance or rebellion that you can do is to internally remove your consent from being governed. I mean, obviously, you're still bound by the laws because they're enforced by men with guns, but there's a piece of you, there's always a piece of someone, even if there was a piece of me, that I was giving consent to being governed. And when I removed that consent and said, I'm an American, but I'm not part of the United States government, right? The United States government is not America. And I removed my consent from being governed by these people. Obviously, they have guns, they can still force me, but I removed my consent. That is the first act of true rebellion that you can make. And it's an internal act, and no one can see it. No one has to know. So you just remove your consent. And since consent is one of the legitimizing forces of the government, even though they can't see it, it shifts the sands from under their feet. So that's the last thing I would like to say.
Thank you very much. And thanks, everyone, for tuning in. And I don't know who we're going to have on next time, but it's going to be a good conversation either way. Thanks for coming on. This has been fantastic.
I loved it. It was fantastic. Thank you for having me.